Hey, you guys, it is CN Nash, and thank you. That's my dog. Thank you so much for tuning into another week of Mirror and Reflection. So, we're just going to keep the ball rolling. So, it's getting a little bit dark, but earlier it was really rainy, and I don't know how the weather's been, but Memphis is so unpredictable. So, to kind of combat the dreariness and the gloominess of today, as well as to kind of offset the topic we're about to talk about, I want to tell some jokes. And I'm going to go ahead and be honest, I like corny jokes. The cornier, the better. So I apologize. Sorry, not sorry. Okay, so first joke. Knock, knock. Of course, you'll say, who's there? And I'll say, woo, woo hoo. Calm down, it's just a joke. See? Okay, that's kind of how the jokes I like. Okay, the second one I really, really like. It's probably one of my favorite ones. Okay, knock, knock. Who's there? Dwayne. Dwayne who? Dwayne the Tub and Brownie. See, I told you. And it's classic, right? It's so good. Okay, another one. It's actually a riddle. What starts with E, ends with E, and only contains one letter? A envelope. Got you thinking on that one. The next one. Okay, why can't you tell a joke while standing on ice? Because it may crack. All right, so I hope that kind of made y'all laugh. I promise you, I love corny jokes. Okay, so we're going to be talking about depression today. And so from last week, we talked about the stages of grief. You know, the 5 stages were we had denial, bargaining, anger, depression, acceptance. And I said I wanted to go more in depth with depression just because while all stages definitely deserve their support, I would say depression is the most alarming one for me. The one that I'm definitely like tuning into just because depression, if you think of depression like a character, depression is not that loud obnoxious guy who's like, ooh, let's get this party started, I'm here, you know. Depression is more like that quiet one, that thief that comes in the middle of the night and sneaks up and you don't know, and you're surprised that he's there and you don't know how he got in. And that's just been my experience with working with people, is that a lot of times people don't realize they're in the state of depression until they're really into it, right? So if you want to think of depression as a definition, even clinical depression, you'll see that it is sadness as well as marked with a loss of interest in things you normally enjoy, that overall both of those two impact your day-to-day functioning. So if you're ever curious about what day-to-day functioning is, go back to my mental health clip. I actually do a mental health check-in and I talk about the different life domains. If you find yourself struggling in those areas, in majority of those areas, or even multiple areas in your life domains, check into that. Definitely get some help because you may be experiencing any form of mental health concerns, including depression. So I do want to share an excerpt from my book, Mirroring Effect, just because at this part, and it's one of my favorite scenes to write, I was able to break up the stages of grief, you know, your denial, your bargaining, your anger, and such. And I personified them. I actually turned them into a person that Desi meets in her dream. So she falls asleep and she has this really, really intense dream. And I want to talk about the moment that she meets depression, this character. Okay. The doorbell rang and I opened it to greet another visitor. After I admitted I had forgotten his name, he shook his head and gently reminded me that he was depression. Standing in his presence, I felt cold and isolated. The other visitors had long disappeared. I no longer cared. Declining my invitation to come in, depression extended his hand and I accompanied him down a path I did not know. I wanted to ask where he was taking me, but I didn't have the energy. I realized I was indifferent. Instead, I continued to walk down depression's chosen path. While a part of me feared him, I recognized something vaguely familiar about him, and that connection soothed me. It reminded me of my sister. Our path dipped lower and lower. The wind chilled my skin more and more as we descended further into hollow ground, a pit. By the time I reached where he had taken me, I discovered that I couldn't retrace my steps. The hole was utterly dark, void of light. When I could no longer feel his hand, I turned and called for depression. I no longer felt comfort. I felt bewildered, and I was unsure what to do next. Depression never responded, and I was left alone in the black pit with no memory of how I arrived in it. I didn't have the energy to find a way out. Surrounded by darkness, my body collapsed into the cold ground. During my time with depression, I wondered how I could forget such a unique character. His personality was enchanting. He beckoned you, drew you into his embrace. Only after he enclosed you in his arms did you realize it was all a ruse. Emptiness was cloaked under layers of promises. He offered assurance, but instead delivered despair, hopelessness. As I lay curled on the floor, I felt myself change. I felt myself evolve. I became Demi. I immediately woke up. And so I enjoyed writing that just because I feel like it's such a creative, interesting way to kind of put if depression had a face, this is what depression would look like, and this is the things that depression would do. You know, a lot of times we find ourselves in depression. We don't even know we're in depressed mode. It's something that just sneaks up on you. A lot of times I describe it as, you know, you're finding yourself climbing to this pit and then you don't know how you got out of it, or you find yourself like walking into a cave and at first it's kind of okay because you can still see some light behind you, but what if right now it's bright, right? What if you find as you walk further and further into the cave, it becomes dimmer and dimmer and darker and darker until you find yourself lost in the middle of the cave and you don't know how you got in and you don't know how to get out. So that's how I would like to describe what depression feels like. Okay, so some symptoms. And another reason why depression is so tricky is because the symptoms look different from person to person. But some symptoms you can check into. Again, think of intense sadness. I also say you may find yourself feeling hopeless and helpless. You may find a mood fluctuation where your moods are just all over the place, but more so you may find yourself becoming extremely agitated, easily irritable. That's something I ask people all the time. It's like, you find yourself becoming quickly frustrated. You know, anyone can set you off. Do you find yourself also noticing a change in your eating or sleeping habits? So with sleeping, do you find yourself oversleeping, like you're doing 10 plus hours, and when you wake up you still don't feel rested, you still feel fatigued? Or you find yourself undersleeping, you're not getting enough sleep, and maybe it's because a lot of times when we find ourselves undersleeping, we have a lot of racing thoughts. So another fact is depression and anxiety are very commonly diagnosed together, you know, and that's because if you find yourself having like rumination, meaning like you're finding yourself thinking over and over persistent thoughts and you can't get them out of your head, you can't concentrate, a lot of times people who report that as a symptom also notice that they're battling with anxiety too. Also, you may even contemplate suicide. That's when it gets really, really severe, you know, just because at this point you're not finding any hope. You feel helpless, you feel hopeless. Also, you feel, you know, a lot of negative thoughts, as in you may feel like a failure, like you can't do anything right, and that your life is not worthy, and this living is not, what's the point? So that's definitely, if you find yourself experiencing any of these symptoms, definitely get help. Another thing I wanted to do is talk about statistics. A lot of times people who experience some type of mental health concerns, they feel like they're the only one. You know, it's very commonly that people think, I'm the only one going through this. There's nobody else that can relate. That's something that actually Demi in the book talks about, how she feels so alone and isolated. And that's another symptom of depression, is you feel alone and isolated. And I wanted to give some statistics to, I would say, encourage you to know that you're not alone and how common depression is. Depression is, in fact, the most common diagnosed disorder in our country at this time. So lots of people do experience depression. As far as numbers, 2.8 million kiddos, that's from ages 12 to 17, have reported experiencing depression. 16.1 million individuals, 16.1 million, y'all, have reported experiencing depression at some point in their lives. So it's definitely something that's not rare. There's so many people out there. And another thing I want to share is that some people a lot of times feel like just because we're in this field, this mental health field, and we're a mental health professional, that we're immune to battles with mental health concerns. And I would be the first to share that I have personally dealt with depression, and I was able to overcome it. One, I'm grateful for my clinical background because I was able to catch it early on. I would say the earlier on you can catch depression, the better you may feel, and the sooner you may feel to getting, you know, that stability back in your life. The longer you let it progress, think about it. If you find yourself like, you know, if you're literally climbing down to a path, like in the book, a pit, think about the time that it took to bring you down. You also have to factor into the time it's going to take to get you to climb out of it. So that's something to consider. But also, I'm still grateful for the experience because looking back, it was something that actually motivated me and challenged me to connect back to my spirituality, to connect back to my relationship with Jesus, and to begin, working on my relationship with God. And honestly, I contribute my spirituality to the leading factor that helped me overcome my depression, because I was feeling hopeless and God gave me hope again. So definitely check into spirituality. Research is showing, even there's so much empirical evidence and empirical research that's going on that actually shows in support of spirituality and faith-based counseling. So definitely check into that. But I just want to end by sharing some tips for you guys if you find yourself experiencing depression, or if you know a loved one who may be. One, I always challenge any person who may be experiencing depression to challenge your thought process. Again, when we're dealing with depression, we have a lot of negative self-talk, a lot of negative thought patterns. And so the first thing I want to do is I want to challenge those thought patterns. One thing I will say is a lot of times we believe our thoughts are truth. And one thing I'll challenge you, I'll say, I will never ask you to lie. However, if you're willing to accept one truth or one variation of the truth, I'm going to challenge you to be able to look at it from a different perspective, especially if it's truth, and especially if it may make you feel better. A lot of times we're so tunnel vision and we focus on the negative that we don't see anything good. And chances are, if there's negative going on, believe it or not, there's definitely some positive going on. We may have to, be creative. But again, there is some truth into some positive perspectives that, I will challenge you to see. Also, a lot of times in depression, because like I said, we're feeling fatigued, we're feeling tired, we have a loss of interest, we don't want to do a lot of stuff. So I always say, the stuff that you don't want to do it. And this is probably like the only time I'm going to actually tell you to do something you don't want to do. Just for the simple fact is you're pretty much think about building new routines again. So again, when we're in depression, we kind of fall into this fatigue, kind of catatonic kind of stuff where we don't feel like doing things because we don't have energy. Well, this is a time too, even though you don't feel like getting up, get up. When you don't feel like taking a shower, take a shower. When you don't feel like communicating or talking to someone, definitely talk to someone. The things that you don't feel like doing when you're depressed, do it. Because what you're going to have to still understand it is you're going to have to give yourself some accountability to push yourself. Okay, to try and get better, and seek out that support, someone who's going to motivate you, someone who's going to, check in with you. I remember there was one time where it was something as simple as opening the blinds, open the windows, let some light in, something as simple as that to help. You don't have to do this big, grand thing where you find yourself wanting to run a mile or things like that. Something, just start off small and then build from there. Also, if you find yourself having racing thoughts or rumination, like I said, also do what's called groundedness, or doing mindfulness. So being grounded is essentially grounding yourself to the here and now. I love doing grounding. It's something as simple as I was just checking in with my body. Again, when we're so much in our head and our thoughts take over, our body kind of gets into panic mode. And to help to subside that, to actually use your body to overcome what's in your head. So being aware of your present. Mindfulness is just being mindful of your surroundings. And there's a lot of techniques. There's actually a technique in the book that Desi runs across. So definitely mindfulness is a great way to kind of cope with the feelings of depression. And just seek help. Again, I'll say this over and over. It's not about being strong. It's about being smart. So definitely seek the help. So I hope that this helps you guys. And I hope that you find hope and you find that motivation. If you find yourself slipping into depression, know that you can overcome no matter what state you are in. I'm a firm believer you can overcome depression, definitely by pushing through, and to know that, to take things day by day and know that it's just part of your journey right now, and that you can overcome it, and that it's not the end. So if you are in the Memphis area, tomorrow I will be in Barnes & Noble at the Wolf Chase location at 3 p.m. talking about Mirror and Effect, as well as you can catch me on Channel 5 tomorrow morning during their show, where I will be talking about mental wellness as well as my book, Mirror and Effect. So until next time, I'm going to give you another joke to wrap up. What is Mario's favorite thing to wear? Denim, denim, denim. God bless.